On the Raiders, owner Mark Davis had a long meeting with interim head coach Antonio Pierce after the game, after the victory against the Denver Broncos at home at Allegiant Stadium. And this is a really big deal because we have to figure out who is going to be the Raiders' next head coach. Is it going to be Antonio Pierce or could it be Jim Harbaugh? There's so much news, so many reports out right now that I had to go live. I had to go and do a whole 45-minute, hour-long thing because there's just so much out there. We got reports from Schefter, NFL insiders on Jim Harbaugh, his connections with the Raiders, how that could be a possibility as early as this week. And also, the door is still open for Antonio Pierce to return as the head coach if the Raiders cannot get in on the Harbaugh sweepstakes. There's so much going on and a lot of shifting and changing in this 2024 coach carousel, not even a QB carousel, coach. So there's so much to decipher here. But first and foremost, we have to talk about this game and how Antonio Pierce has ended the season. Another thing that we're going to talk about, GM Champ Kelly. There's a new report about him and how he might not necessarily for sure be a lock with the Las Vegas Raiders. So we're going to decipher all this, try to get inside the mind of Mark Davis, get inside his mind only, because whatever Mark Davis decides to do, that is what's going to happen. You know, fans could want one thing. Players can want another thing. Coaches could want this thing. I could be wanting something, but it only matters as to what Mark Davis wants and what he plans to do. Also, John Gruden, the showdown with the NFL is coming up this Wednesday. We'll get into that at the very end, but let's just go straight in to after this game. You got this being reposted by Dov Kleiman. You have Antonio Pierce soaking it all in, enjoying the moment. I don't want to play too much of the music. You got the AP chants. I mean, look, he's won over the fans. He's got them motivated and pumped up. There's one issue. Could this be the post-Josh McDaniels effect? Could that be what it is? We know that oftentimes when an interim head coach comes in, when people really dislike the previous guy, you get a bump. However, I think Pierce, he's done a little something more than that. I think he has a lot more swagger, especially at press conferences and, you know, with his interaction with fans. I think he has more swagger in that department, which has made him a likable guy. And this kind of way he's going about it is quite interesting because Mark Davis ultimately is going to do what he wants, but he's got to do what fans like. I mean, he's going to sell more tickets, make more money, have more support if he's doing what fans like. And we saw what happened earlier in the year with fans yelling at Mark Davis saying, fire Josh McDaniels. He definitely doesn't want to be heckled and doesn't want a repeat of that. Speaking of Josh McDaniels, I gotta show, by the way, the son of a gun won't go. The son of a gun won't go. Josh McDaniels, there's a report that he was at the Jets game, Patriots versus Jets. This is the first time that Josh McDaniels has been out there in public, and it happened during the Patriots versus Jets game. He was in the VIP booth. You had this reporter who's a Patriots reporter for several years. He was the first one to break this down in a tweet this morning. Kyle Hightower, let me just pull it up for you real quick. Yeah, right here. Spotted. Former Raiders coach and Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels entering the VIP gate at Gillette Stadium. So we're going to get into some of the coaching carousel rumors and reports that are happening. And these are reports from legit sources, NFL Network. I mean, it's the top of the top. But I really do think that Josh McDaniels, we could see him as a coach again, perhaps with the Patriots, and maybe we'll see the Raiders go against the Patriots in the future. Josh McDaniels versus Antonio Pierce, maybe, or Harbaugh. We'll find out. But McDaniels is not gone. And by the way, I know Genius Josh doesn't want to hear this, but wherever he goes, Wi-Fi Willie will be sure to keep the world up to date as to what's going on with Genius Josh. Yes, we will. Yes, indeed, we will. So getting back to Pierce, though, in all of this, I mean, look, he's won. He not only, so we show Pierce winning the fans over and winning. Then this is going to be examples of him winning players over. Now we're going to hear from Max Crosby. Devontae Adams has made some comments as well. Crosby spoke multiple times. You got in the locker room, you got the guys smoking cigars, and not only do you have the guys smoking cigars after the victory, you have Jack Jones there, Simmons, I believe the defensive passing coach. And then you also have Charles Woodson with the W on his hat for Wi-Fi. No, I'm just kidding. But you got Charles Woodson there also smoking a cigar as well, enjoying the dub. So that was kind of interesting. You saw the alumni get involved here. And then after the game, Pierce goes to the locker room. One thing that I want us to pay attention to, and we're going to show this in just a second, is because I'm all about body language. I know when you're breaking down the NFL, when you're breaking down stuff that's happening, when you're trying to figure out what are people really saying, how do they really feel, what is likely going to happen, not about what you want to happen, but what is likely going to happen. I read body language, and I think there's a lot of clues from Antonio Pierce and things that he said in his press conference. We'll get into that. But hey, like I said, winning the fans over. Before the game, Antonio Pierce did go to the tailgate. You know, he's out there hanging out, trying to be with the fans. We saw John Gruden do this a lot. He'd go to the, Ricky's over there and not Oakland, but the city next to Oakland. I'm blanking on the name. But he would go to Ricky's often, John Gruden, and you see Pierce trying to do the same thing, get in with the fans, winning the fans over. But the biggest fan he has to win over is Mark Davis, and that's what we have to figure out. Did he do that? Decent record in the division, but here's what he did. Hung out with the fans, celebrated with them after the game, and he made a comment about this that I think we really need to pay attention to, what he said with regards to why he wanted to get close to the fans. I thought it was very telling. But here's Max Crosby after the game talking about the situation.
At the end of the day, we want to be in the playoffs.
So yeah, he was asked if this was a successful season. He says, "F no, I want to be in the playoffs." I'm not gonna show him say the F word. Let's be PG-13 here, okay?
I feel like it would be a lot different. If we get a full season, and that's what we're hoping next year.
So that's an important comment. He feels like it would be a lot different if they got a full season. He didn't specify who, but I'm sure he's meaning Antonio Pierce. If he got a full season, they'd probably be in the playoffs. That's what he's saying. That's Crosby's claim here.
But yeah, I've been here 5 years, made the playoffs one time, and I'm sick of it. So I want to be in the playoffs consistently. I want to win. I want to be in the biggest games, and I have my brothers with me.
He wants to be in the biggest games, wants to make the playoffs. We hear ya. We don't blame ya. That makes perfect sense, right? But the big thing I think he said was in the beginning, because this is only on the playoffs. In the beginning, I think this is the big thing he said, and shout out to Gilberto for posting this. Gil on air. Check him out. Gil_on air, reporter for 8 News Now. I'm going to give this guy a follow. This guy seems badass. Anyways, that's a big thing that he says there, which is like, if Pierce had the full year, maybe it is playoffs.
At the end of the day, we want to be in the playoffs. But I feel like it would be a lot different. If we get a full season, that's what
could be a lot different if we get a full season. That's very telling, very telling. Now, gonna get into Davante Adams. Gonna get into him real quick. Right here, actually, you know what? Let's just hear what he has to say. So Davante Adams and what he says. Because here's the thing. Here's my opinion on Adams. And here's my opinion on all these guys. I think Pierce, especially I think Crosby, because he's such a defensive guy, probably really enjoys Pierce. And Davante has been supportive of Pierce, but we have seen Davante's numbers not be too great. The Raiders, and we've seen him be sometimes upset with the lack of production on offense. Now, maybe they don't have the right quarterback. Maybe internally they know that. We'll talk about Aiden O'Connell in a little bit. Maybe, he feels like if they had more of an offensive-minded coach, things could be a little differently. That's a possibility. We know that there's been reports and rumors that the Jets will stop at nothing. They said the Jets will stop at nothing to pursue Davante Adams. This was on ESPN. I mean, that's not really a very controversial take or opinion. And I got this thing on my head. Oh my God. Hold on. Let me fix this here. Real quick, Psycho Jacko, yo, Willie, we won. F it. Give AP 1 year only. Let's keep AOC and let's draft O-line help and structure some contracts and get a better offensive coach. And I think that would definitely be something that's necessary, is you would need an offensive coordinator, because Bo Hardegree is a rookie offensive coordinator. You definitely need that if you're rolling with the Pierce show. But appreciate you. And Psycho Jackal there. So Davante Adams, is he going to be happy with this? Does he want more of an offensive-minded head coach? Would he be cool with them bringing in a coordinator? On the flip side, you have the issue with, is the offensive coordinator really going to be stoked to play for a head coach who might have less experience than them? A lot of the offensive coordinators that are out there have coached in the NFL longer than Antonio Pierce. Would they like this guy, a guy who has less experience than them, being their boss, telling them what to do? There might be an issue there unless there's a guy who really likes Pierce, who really believes in what the Raiders are doing. But here's Davante Adams after the game.
Raider Nation, what's going on, man? Appreciate y'all once again. the support. I mean, it's been unbelievable this year. You know, some trying times for sure, but appreciate y'all. See you next year.
This is one of my favorite ones, and I know that I'm annoying with some of the stuff, but I do, because Devontae, look, early in the year, he said he doesn't have time to be waiting around, and that was when the McDaniels shit show was happening. He's made some comments before where he gets upset with the lack of production on offense. He's been a lot nicer under the Antonio Pierce, but you got the Jets saying they're willing to go all in. If you're Devontae Adams, you did not come here to play with Aiden O'Connell and Jimmy Garoppolo. That's not why you came to the Raiders. And we know the Derek Carr thing, the past is the past. But Devontae Adams, like, he's probably looking at his options. I mean, just realistically, if you're Devontae Adams, why would you not consider playing with Aaron Rodgers again next year? Obviously, that would be on your mind. Even if the Raiders do keep Antonio Pierce, yes, you got to be positive when you're speaking about Pierce to the media, because what if you stay with the Raiders? And maybe you do like Pierce and think he's great for the Raiders, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he's great for Devontae Adams. Maybe Devontae Adams would prefer an offensive coach. We'll see. But I find this, I think if they do get the right quarterback, the right coordinator, obviously he would be stoked. And even if they don't, maybe he'd be stoked anyway if he loves living in Vegas, loves playing for the Raiders. But I do find this funny. He says, see you next year. You know, almost trying to tease like, oh, I'm for sure coming back next year. See you next year. And I guess I read body language and all that stuff, so I like the lip bite after. Like, see you next year.
Y'all, see you next year.
See you next. Like, oh no, it froze. But you guys know what I'm saying, right? See you next year. All right, I gotta pause on it. See you next year. See, does that mean he's coming back? Do you guys think he's coming back? Does that mean see you next year? He's coming back. I mean, I don't know. I hope so. I hope they find the right quarterback. But yeah, you know, I watched this guy as a Fresno State Bulldog, and you know what? That ain't right. When he's not getting the ball like that, that ain't right. That ain't right. That's all I'm going to say. Devontae Adams, though, says he's supportive of Pierce. And we'll see if he's supportive of, maybe he's supportive of Pierce, but no Aiden O'Connell. You know, it could be that too. It could be that simple. That's another thing we're going to get into. Like, would the Raiders still maybe pursue a quarterback? Would Pierce, if he became the head coach? We'll find out if that's actually happening. These reports are pretty crazy. We got to actually get right into it. We're already lagging a little too long. All right, here we go. So Crosby, we have something special brewing. We changed the whole team around in a short time. I'm just going to show a short part of this.
To come out here and, like I said, put a stamp on the season. So, you know, for me, I was out there hooping, freestyle.
All right, freestyle. No, not this
the
part.
Whole staff. We just hope we keep things rolling in the right direction because we got something special brewing.
Yeah, we got something special brewing. And then he also said something else later, like, I have no control, but we got something special brewing, and I don't know why you'd mess that up. So something like that.
They went crazy when he went this offseason. You have in yourselves.
And this lady sounds like a little nerd.
We love what AP does. We love what, you know, our defensive staff, everybody, you know, involved to get to where we are. You know, it hasn't been perfect, but we kept fighting, and we've changed this whole team around. And
okay, yeah, that's the change of the whole team around. And then that's what he's basically saying is, like, why would you mess that up? You know, if they did change this whole team around and they had this decent 9-game stretch. Now, look, it was a good 9-game stretch, but it's only 5-4. And there's 4. I'm sorry, man. There's 4 losses in there. There's 4 losses in there when you got a pretty good team. Taking a look at what they did. I mean, the Chargers game was magical. The Chiefs game was magical. You guys know we all love that. But you lose to the Vikings 3-0. That was probably one of the worst. That was one of the worst L's I've seen. You lost to the Vikings like that. That was disgusting. You lost to the Dolphins, which makes sense because it's in Miami. The Dolphins are a hot team. And then you lose to the Chiefs. That makes sense. Then the Colts lost when you could have won that game. And there was really on New Year's Eve, I felt like in the Colts game, there was so much bad game management. Punting the football when you shouldn't. Then going aggressive when you shouldn't on fourth down. There was a lot of weird game management by Pierce. And I think there's a lot of decisions that he made that he'd want to have that back. But that's part of the growing pains of having a young team. Maybe Crosby is a believer in this fact that if Pierce gets another year, he'd be even better than he is today. Perhaps that is a possibility. But we'll see if Mark Davis agrees. 0 penalties in this game. The second game this year with 0 penalties. They have been a more disciplined team, the Raiders, mainly with the lack of pre-snap penalties. And the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist in me is always saying, hey, the refs aren't giving it many PI calls against the Raiders that I think they normally get, holding calls and whatnot. Maybe the team is just more disciplined all around, but As a Raiders fan who's watched this team for decades upon decades, over 2 decades, we always get screwed with penalties, you know? So I've been a little shocked at that. Maybe some of the refs like Pierce. Who knows? Who knows? But we know these players like Pierce, and there's a big comment. This is Vinny B, Vincent Bosingor. By the way, he has a very interesting article we'll get into in a little bit about the Harbaugh situation. Nate Hobbs, cornerback, was talked to after the game, and also Jack Jones. Keep in mind, Jack Jones was pretty much brought here by Antonio Pierce. I mean, he coached him in high school at Long Beach Poly. He also coached him in college as an Arizona State Sun Devil, and now he's with them in the NFL. We have our video. Raiders interim head coach reunites with a friend with a dark past because, you know, Jack Jones has gotten in trouble and sometimes, nothing too big of a deal, but he has gotten in trouble sometimes, and he got released by the Patriots for discipline reasons, mainly with showing up late to team meetings and whatnot. However, Jones has really turned it around with the Raiders, has ended up being a complete steal with the Raiders. You see him making plays even in this past game, some amazing pass breakups. And he's here because of Antonio Pierce, and he's playing his ass off because he wants Antonio Pierce to get the job. That is what he wants. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't happen. Who knows? But he's definitely going to bat for Pierce as much as possible, go out of his way to try to rally people to, in his own words, we'll see what he says right now, to boycott if they don't get Pierce. Maybe I should have mentioned that, like boycott. That's what he literally says here. We're going to show the clip in just a second. Psycho Jackal, hey, Myers can be a number 1, 2. Tucker is going to get better and that will be bad for opposing teams. Adams needs a restructure. JJ should get a contract, but a 2-year, $9 million. Cut Garoppolo. And that was absolutely hilarious. I wonder if I can find the video where we were able to get Jimmy Garoppolo. We had a Jimmy Garoppolo sighting in the game. Did you guys see that? So in the game, Aiden O'Connell hurts his finger, and then freaking Jimmy G comes in. And the fans are booing because they think that O'Connell's benched for Jimmy G. But what actually happened is what actually happened is freaking O'Connell just hurt his finger. So this woman's pointing this out. Yeah, I guess they have cell phone footage. Jimmy Garoppolo. We had a Jimmy G signing. He was in the game for just a few plays, ready to go, but he has his injury guarantees. That is why the Raiders are not playing Jimmy Garoppolo at all. Appreciate you, Psycho Jackal. Trying to avoid anything bad happening, because if he does get injured, then the Raiders will owe him $10 million regardless if he's on the team. We got more on Crosby talking about Antonio Pierce. And I got so many reports from Schefter, from Rappaport, from Pelissero, from so many people about the Raiders head coaching situation. You guys want to stick around to the end of this. We're going to get into some of the more meaty, important stuff that's very critical as to what Mark Davis is thinking right now. Now, this just popped up, and I personally haven't even heard this yet, so I'm going to watch this live with you guys.
It's hard to do, so we got a guy that's played at the highest level, won a Super Bowl, he's been a captain, and now he's a great coach, and he's a leader. It's hard to find leaders of men, so for us, we just need to keep building on top of the foundation we've already built.
All right, so Crosby is just really batting hard for Antonio Pierce and saying, hey, it's interesting because Pierce doesn't have many coaching accolades, not much coaching experience. You notice Crosby was invoking him as a player, saying, hey, he's won a Super Bowl as a player, and trying to use that as a reason to grab him. But typically, look, I don't know why it works this way, but typically former NFL players aren't head coaches. I mean, which former NFL players who actually played in the NFL are active head coaches? I mean, I know Mike Vrabel off the top of my head. If you guys can name some more in the comments below, let me know. But let's get into Nate Hobbs and Jack Jones. And Jack Jones making the comment about boycotting if Pierce is not the head coach.
Hell of a game.
Right. What do you think the key is to make sure that this kind of game is going to be more consistent?
He got like a little distracted there.
What do you feel you guys have to make sure these types of games are the more consistent games in terms of the outcome?
I think really all we got to do is bring AP back. That's all I'm saying.
So Nate Hobbs, he's asked, what do they need to do to be more consistent in these games? And Nate Hobbs, look, Nate Hobbs has barely met AP since he got hired by Josh McDaniels. Like, he's not like Jack Jones, or Jack Jones obviously is biased, has a personal relationship with Antonio Pierce, outside of football, all the way going back to since he was a kid. But Hobbs has more of a professional relationship, just kind of met the guy, right? And hey, that's what Nate Hobbs, one of the star corners on the Raiders, is saying is we need to bring AP back to be more consistent. So it's an all-out pro Pierce from Crosby to Hobbs and a little bit of Devontae Adams.
Bring AP back. That's all. Simple as that. Simple as that. Simple as that. Plain and simple.
You feel good about going into next year? I know this is going to be a year where you, offseason, where you think about.
I mean, that's very intense.
We boycotted.
And there's Jack Jones, what he really says. This is where it gets next level, where like Jack Jones is a little frank. And even when he was saying about the ref calls, he's been making some comments where like, oh, I wasn't offsides on the field goal. And like, dude, I get it. Like there's bullshit against the Raiders, but like we need to see Jack Jones getting fined. And the NFL is kind of shitty where they'll fine a player $20,000. And if you're a player making like, you know, like $1 million a year, like $20,000 ain't nothing. You're going to want that $20,000. So that's a little tough. So he's got to be careful. And here's what he says about the boycotting.
Think about
If you don't come back, man, we boycotted.
If AP don't come back, we're boycotting. I mean, he laughs it off and laughs it, but he's friends with Pierce. We know the guy is serious. And look, I love the enthusiasm. I love defending your guy. I'm never going to criticize somebody for that. You got to be careful though, because what if he doesn't come back? You don't want to be in bad graces with the new head coach. You got to look out for your career and yourself, and try to not make any mistakes, because man, they try to catch people making mistakes all the time and take them down. So you got to be careful. But he must be. Maybe he's confident. Maybe he knows something we don't know. Who knows? You know, I think maybe he just knows that now is the time to root for Pierce. This is where the media is going to be all focused on the Raiders right now, wrapping up the final game. Then they're moving on in the playoffs, and they're moving on to the other teams until some news is announced. So definitely trying to send a message to Mark Davis. We'll talk more about Mark Davis, his thoughts. Yes, it was San Leandro. Thanks for getting that. Ricky's and San Leandro. It was so just out of my mind. Good catch. Good catch.
It out like the 2012 NBA lockout.
I mean, obviously he means a lot to you guys. You know, and were you playing for him today?
Yeah, for sure. We all was. He means something to us. You
Why is that?
Yeah, so he's like, that's funny. It'll be like the NBA lockout. So they're really, really, I mean, look, they're clearly saying, I don't know if they actually boycott, but they're definitely joking around about it. And it's definitely in their mind. It's definitely in their mind. Mark Davis, you got to watch out. Your corners are playing pretty great. You don't want them to mutiny. Who knows? But Harbaugh's
allow us to be us. That's special. You know, you don't get that at this level.
Right.
So yeah, I mean that's part of the message. Pierce kind of allowing a little more freedom, you know, for the players. Some of these other coaches must be harsh. You know, who knows?
How to be yourself and play how you want to play. Bring yourself to work every day and make you love your job, man.
So love the job. When you're under Josh McDaniels, you hate the job. You can't stand the job. Under Antonio Pierce, a lot better. So that was an insane video talking about boycotting, the possibility of boycotting, at least joking about it and bringing the idea up. And I know they're just having some fun, but yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely crossing their mind. Like we just mentioned earlier, Josh McDaniels was at the Patriots game. And then, so here's another thing too. So another reason why I think that those players were making those jokes about keeping Antonio Pierce and the mutiny. Because here's the thing. Vinny B, the same reporter who was asking them questions, and maybe I should have been more clear about this beginning setting this up, but hopefully you guys are sticking with me through the whole video. Because there's going to be a lot more juicy stuff that you're not going to want to miss. So the same reporter who asked Jack Jones and them about Pierce, who asked Jack Jones and Hobbs about Pierce, and they said they'd mutiny, that same reporter is the same one who recently did this story laughing at the idea of a locker room mutiny if they went with Harbaugh instead of Pierce. And he kind of puts a face palm. He's kind of laughing at the idea that the players would mutiny or boycott if the team did not hire Pierce and hired somebody like Harbaugh. Vinny B was sort of laughing at that idea. And that is why that is why I believe those players were kind of making that joke about how they would boycott if AP. These players are on Twitter too. These players hear the news too. They know what the reporters are saying. So I think they knew they were speaking to the same guy who did this story, and they're giving him a hard time for it. They are. So check it out. So here's the key moment in this. And I believe what he says is something to the effect that if they do get somebody like Harbaugh, he doesn't think there'd be any, he think the players would jump on board. That's basically what this reporter's saying.
For itself. So I would expect Max and Devontae to get behind Jim Harbaugh if it goes down that path.
Yeah, if it goes down that path, he expects Max and Devontae to get behind Jim Harbaugh. Doesn't think there would be a mutiny.
And do turn to Jim Harbaugh. I don't think that's going to be a very tough sell with players like Devontae and players like Max Crosby in particular. There's nothing that you really have to explain if you're the Raiders in why you chose Jim Harbaugh over Antonio Pierce. The resume, the record, the track.
That's a big comment. There's nothing you really have to explain if you choose Jim Harbaugh over Antonio Pierce. That is a big comment. So he's saying he thinks the players will get behind, and there's nothing you have to explain if you decide to do that. And then these guys say they will mutiny.
They played a hell of a game. Simple as that, man. Bring AP back.
Bring AP back. And they're doing that. And they're boycotting.
Don't come back, man. We boycotted.
So giving them a hard time. These players have a very good memory. They know what you're writing. They know what you're saying. There you go. And there you go. See them have some fun. So let's go into this next period. We talked about the game. Great game. Just final thoughts on the game. And I'm sure all of you have seen the game, at least seen the highlights. So I'm not going to bore you with all that. But defense obviously played amazing. Jarrett Stidham had a hard time. For the majority of the game, great pass rush. Malcolm Kuntz, a former Gruden draft pick, and Max Crosby, another former Gruden draft pick, both did quite well in terms of pass rush. Offensive run game with Zamir White. Could Zamir White be the future starting running back of the Raiders? I mean, that's just like a legitimate question as of now. And Aiden O'Connell played a clean game. No turnovers, some inaccuracy, but also some giving Devontae some opportunities to get some touchdowns, and Trey Tucker as well. So competent game, nothing too flashy, but safe and clean. Now, here's where we get into all the stuff that I think for you guys who are really concerned about where the Raiders are going, who could their next head coach be? And then that necessarily will affect what they do with their roster. What is Mark Davis thinking? What decision will he make? Has he already made up his mind? Based on this Pierce press conference, he may have already made up his mind. We'll get into that in just a second. But Vinny B also made a story, and this is right after the game, right as the game was kicking off, that interim GM Champ Kelly is in play for multiple NFL GM jobs. It looks like Kelly will have options. That is what he is saying. And look, the reason why that is such a big deal is because Champ Kelly sort of decided that Pierce should be the interim head coach. It was his decision. Like, as soon as Mark Davis fired, McDaniels, promoted Kelly, asked Kelly who he wants to be the interim head coach. He chose Pierce. Sandra Douglas Morgan, the president, was also behind nominating Pierce. So there's all of that. And one key thing that Mark Davis recently said, so before we go into what Mark Davis said previously, Kelly is getting interest from other teams. So Mark Davis has previously said that he interviewed Kelly before giving the GM job to Dave Ziegler. Had he not given the GM job to Dave Ziegler, he believes he likely would have hired Champ Kelly to be the general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders. That is why it was so easy to promote him. And he was already the assistant GM, already almost ready to get it done, right? So I think Mark Davis seems like he likes the guy. I think he kind of wanted the guy. However, one thing that he said about when it comes to Pierce and this gentleman, and this goes all the way back to The Athletic, Mark Davis, when he was interviewed by The Athletic, and this was in early December, around December 13th, when it comes to what he wants to do, like whether or not he's going to get Pierce, whether or not he's going to get, Champ Kelly as the GM. He talked about having this football mind in the background, but one thing that he said in particular, and I'm trying to find the exact quote so I don't misquote him, because he previously said he'd like for them to get the job, but he has an open mind and he's trying to keep his mind open about this process. And here's the big thing. This is the big thing. This is in The Athletic. Tashawn Reed interviewing Mark Davis on December 13th, roughly less than a month ago. I don't believe you can tie Antonio and Champ at the hip. It's not both or none. It could be one or the other. I just don't know. I'm not making a commitment right now. I'm in the process. I'm getting a lot of calls from people who have clients who they feel would be great for the job. I'm baking those names, and we'll see what happens when the season's over. But the big thing he says is I don't believe you can tie them together. So to me, that really stands out to me when we hear this report that Champ Kelly, the guy who, I mean, you could say they're not tied together, but he's the one who made the decision to give Pierce the interim head coaching job. He could have given it to Patrick Graham. He could have given it to maybe Coach Brasillo. There's a lot of different people he could have given it to, right? But he chose to give it to Antonio Pierce. Even though they're not tied at the hip, it did seem like there was they liked each other and want to work with each other. But now you got Kelly, who is going to be in play for multiple GM jobs around the NFL. We know he's been a hotshot candidate for some time. He'll have options. So whatever the Raiders decide to do at head coach, you're not a shoo-in to get this guy. And maybe Davis tries to retain Kelly and see who he wants to choose as head coach. Does Kelly want to choose Pierce? Did he think Pierce would just be the good interim? But maybe when you're looking at the whole wide scope of who's available in the market, maybe Kelly would prefer somebody else to be a full-time head coach. We don't know. But definitely, we're not going to be able to just get Kelly. Now, for Pierce, I don't believe that there's not competition for Pierce, right? Like, nobody else is offering Pierce a head coaching job based on his lack of experience and the fact that he's kind of been thrown into this role as an interim in the middle of the season. Now, Kelly, people are trying to get him. It's not a shoo-in that we can keep him. It is a shoo-in that the Raiders could keep Antonio Pierce, though. So, going to be some competition for that guy. And look, there's going to be a lot of competition all around. Huge thing that happened. And we're going to get into the rap sheet reports. We're going to get into some of the Schefter reports about Harbaugh, about John Gruden, about Antonio Pierce also, and the prospects of him landing this job full time, and what the official sources have said. Sources close to Mark Davis have said. What have these leaks said? And here's another interesting thing. And I actually got this sent to me by somebody, and let's see if I can get it for sure. So this is Josh Jacobs. So this was on Twitter. Josh Jacobs deleted this tweet, and this was right before the Broncos game. We know Josh Jacobs has not been playing. I don't know what's going on there. He has not been playing. And oh, here we go. This is actually a little neater. I got a neater version of it. Josh Jacobs is questionable again, not available, and then ruled out with a game time decision. But what Josh Jacobs said in this now deleted tweet, and this is big stuff. Nobody's talked about this anyway. I mean, you guys joining me and watching this right now, I haven't had time to make this. Maybe I should make it a lot sooner, but maybe I'll make it tomorrow. Who knows? So a deleted tweet by Josh Jacobs. This is a conversation they're having about him, if he's going to be. So if he's going to be on the team next year. Jacobs, everybody is talking about you no longer being a Raider next season. Yay or nay? That's what this person, 809 Sensation on Twitter, said to Josh Jacobs. And Josh Jacobs did respond. He did respond here. And he says, we don't even know who's going to be the head coach. And I never said I wanted to leave, so I don't know. So this was on a thread where Jacobs was, sometimes he goes back and forth with people on some of these threads. And this is what people claim he says. We don't even know who's going to be the head coach. I mean, obviously nobody knows who's going to be the head coach. But seems like he's even questioning his own future as to what's going to happen next. Tashawn Reed, and this is happening. This is why, if you were like me waiting for the Antonio Pierce press conference, it took forever, and we're waiting and waiting and waiting for the guy to get to the podium. Now, this is unusual, but here's the thing. After every single game, Antonio Pierce does talk to Mark Davis. This is what Mark Davis does with a lot of coaches. Every time he talks to them after the game, right? Sometimes it's longer than others. Usually when they win, it's a pretty quick conversation, and when they lose, it takes a long time. it takes a very long time. It's like when they went 3-0 against the Vikings, not scoring a single point. So another lengthy meeting between the Raiders owner and interim head coach Antonio Pierce. This was so long. I mean, this was like 45 minutes. I mean, it took forever to get this guy on the podium. And I don't know what's going on. Pierce, we're going to show this in a second, appeared emotional afterwards. And one key thing about Pierce is he was wearing glasses. I never see this guy wear glasses at a press conference. I'm not going to make any claims. You guys tell me. Is he putting glasses on to cover up some of the emotions? Maybe there's some waterworks going on there. I don't know. I'm not going to put that on him, but definitely switched it up. He definitely went ahead and said, hey, I'm going to put glasses on after having a lengthy meeting with Mark Davis. You got it. Could it be tears of joy? Maybe it's tears of joy. Maybe he freaking put the glasses on, too emotional, not trying to get too worked up and break down at the press conference because he's got it locked down. I'm not going to say that's not a possibility. At the same time, you know, based on some of his comments, and we'll get into it, it does seem like, and based on some of these reports we're going to show, it does seem like maybe he was getting emotional because it might be farewell. So we'll find out, and we'll let you know what. We'll just show you everything that's out there, and you'll make your decision as to what you believe is going on here. So when it comes to Pierce, a lot of people, including Adam Schefter, were predicting that he is leaning towards being safe. This is before the game. But this kind of contradicts some other reports, but leaning towards safe.
Mark Davis has a big decision to make, and he's got support amongst key players there in Las Vegas. The last time he moved away.
And they talked about the Bisaccia, but I think the important thing.
No, this time he may have learned his lesson. We have to see how that's going to play out before Antonio Pierce would get that job.
Keeping his options open.
Yes, Mark Davis decides to make a major push for Jim Harbaugh. We will say that Antonio Pierce, we're leaning in, but Mark Davis is interested in other people, and we have to see.
So Mark Davis is interested in other people still, leaning towards safe, and that's what I think is going on here with Antonio Pierce, and I think that's why maybe he was emotional after the game, after the press conference. Maybe that is why they had such a lengthy conversation. Who knows if maybe he got work, because there's so many emotions. Like think about it from Pierce's perspective. And look, I've made videos critical of Pierce. I don't think he has the experience to be the head coach of a franchise. I mean, I hope he does and could be successful, but I think that's a tough sell and it's a big risk. And I don't think that's controversial to say. And I think that's what most people think. But just being sympathetic to him and going from his perspective, I mean, that's a whirlwind of emotions to go through in a short amount of time. You know, you come out here, you get a victory at home. Maybe it's your last time with the clipboard, with the Raiders on the sideline. You go through all that emotion, people chanting your name. It's epic. It's crazy. You're at the tailgate earlier. Maybe you get this opportunity. And then after that, you got to go and do a locker room speech. And then after that, you got to meet with Mark Davis for an hour. I mean, that's a lot of emotions to go through for a guy. And perhaps it all just got to him at the press conference. We'll show the press conference in just a second. But I first want to talk about these Harbaugh rumors. Not even rumors. I mean, these are just reports. I mean, if Adam Schefter is saying this, it's at a certain point where it's not that it's a lot. I mean, it's happening. I mean, this is happening where, you know, Mark Davis is actually interested in other people, and that is what Adam Schefter was reporting in that clip that I showed you. This freaking Little Caesars ad. Oh, I just gave him an ad by mentioning their freaking name. All right, but first, before I get into this, let's take a look at Josh Bueno. Shout out to you. Top hires for the dark side: Darth Harbaugh, Emperor Belichick, Kylo Ron Rivera, Jar Jar Pierce. Oh my God. I love the freaking Star Wars remix of all these people. Darth Harbaugh. Please don't do Belichick. They're not gonna go Patriots way 2 years in a row. I think that'd be an absolute disaster if they do that. So we know the Belichick thing's not happening, but the Harbaugh thing, I appreciate you, Josh Bueno. Let's get into that. So Pierce, I mean, I've seen the guy wear glasses before, but I've never seen him do it at a press conference. And so we had the Adam Schefter saying that Mark Davis is looking into other people. There's other people he's interested in. He wants to make a big play for a head coach, perhaps Jim Harbaugh, and he's going to weigh his options before he makes the decision to get Pierce. And there's people he wants more than Pierce, is basically what Schefter's saying here. I mean, am I crazy to think that?
We will say that Antonio Pierce will leave. Mark Davis decides to make a major push for Jim Harbaugh. We will say that Antonio Pierce, we're leaning in.
Yeah. If Mark Davis makes a major play for Jim Harbaugh, or it's Pierce. So Pierce is it's kind of like a backup plan. And this came out January 6th. This came out literally yesterday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero. Multiple NFL teams gathering information on Michigan's Jim Harbaugh as potential coaching hire. Now, it's the Raiders and the Chargers. The Raiders and the Chargers are the main teams gathering information on Jim Harbaugh. That's really, if I were just to summarize this, that's what it is. That's what this story is by Rap Sheet and Tom Pelissero. So what's crazy is Jim Harbaugh, he's playing in this national championship game on Monday. Because he's not technically employed by another NFL team, because he's employed by the NCAA, by Michigan, he could take the job very soon. I mean, he could literally win that championship game, the national title, and the next day be the Raiders head coach. Things could move that quickly. The Chargers are believed to be among the teams, at least considering speaking with Jim Harbaugh, who turned 60. The Raiders might speak with him as well. Harbaugh has connections to other teams that could potentially make some head coaching changes, such as the Bears, who selected him in the draft, blah, blah, blah. But the Raiders and the Chargers are believed to be the teams who are going to speak with Jim Harbaugh. That's just straight up true. This is Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero telling you that the Raiders are among those teams who are interested in speaking with Jim Harbaugh and who will speak with him before they make their decision. If you're Mark Davis, you have to have the conversation. You can't just, you got to do your due diligence and go through the process anyways. You got to interview a select number of people, especially 2 minority coaches. It's part of the NFL rules. So you got to do your due diligence anyways. So definitely, they're going to definitely talk to Harbaugh. So in-person interviews, Harbaugh is free to speak with NFL teams immediately. Harbaugh is free to speak with NFL teams immediately, just like we were mentioning earlier. And I joked around about this because Colin Kaepernick worked out with the Raiders in 2022. So will Jim Harbaugh reunite with Colin Kaepernick and the Raiders? And you know what's a really funny thing? You know what? This is why I like lives, because things come to me randomly and then I could show you. Just to grind some of the little... Let's get a little weird. Let's get a little weird. And this is actually some stuff that I think has some meat on the bone too. Las Vegas Review-Journal was highlighting this. This is something you're definitely going to want to check out. Sandra Douglas Morgan, not only her, but also the CEO of PF Chang's at a tech event, speaking, promoting Las Vegas as a tech city hub. And not only that, but Colin Kaepernick was also in attendance as well. This is the second time, and I'm going to pull this up and I'm looking for it. I got it. This is the second time, because I joke around about this. I joke around about Jim Harbaugh, because look, so we know for a fact the Raiders are going to talk to Jim Harbaugh. The Raiders and the Chargers are. That's what Ian Rappaport's saying. We know that's happening. And California tech millionaires and billionaires are eyeing Las Vegas as new home. You got Kaepernick there. So this was an event where you literally had the CEO of PF Chang's, or was it Panda Express? Please tell me it's PF Chang's. Please tell me. Because that would just be perfect. That would be like Mark Davis written all over it. Let's check it. Yeah, Panda Express. Oh, Panda Express. Not PF Chang's. But you had Kaepernick and Sandra Douglas Morgan. Kaepernick and Sandra Douglas Morgan at this event. So she's always hanging out with Kaepernick. This is the second event in the past 2 years that we've seen her with Kaepernick. I'm not saying something's going on there, but I'm just saying Jim Harbaugh is going to interview with the Raiders. His former QB when he was with the Niners was Kaepernick. And now Kaepernick is always hanging out with literally the Raiders team president. Is something going on? Who knows, man? But keep your eyes. Maybe he'll be a mentor backup. Who knows? Keep your eyes peeled for that. It's a little silly, but it's not crazy. So that was the latest from Rap Sheet. Now, Adam Schefter had some things to say about the Raiders, and I thought this was very, very important, very critical, very odd too. When you take a look at some of the things that Schefter's saying, and it's actually, if I'm going to be real, it's not the greatest news for somebody like Pierce. Now, let me get this nice and neat so you guys can see it here. Maybe I'll just have it at the bottom a little more. So, can you handle that, Andre? Or nothing, I got it. So shout out to you guys all in the chat. The chat is moving very quickly. We got so much more to talk about. I'm going to get into this new report by Schefter. This one came out last night as well. So here we go. Pro Bowl defensive end Max Crosby has obviously said he wants them to keep Pierce. Raiders owner Mark Davis is a big fan of Pierce, as he should be. The question is whether there's another candidate like Michigan's Jim Harbaugh who tempts Davis enough to bypass Pierce. This is Adam Schefter talking about Mark Davis, that Jim Harbaugh tempts Davis enough to bypass Pierce. So we have Schefter and Rappaport saying that Mark Davis is going to meet with Jim Harbaugh and he is tempting Davis to bypass Pierce. And the Raiders still have to complete their search and process, even if they wanted Pierce. That's what they're bringing up. But here is the big news. Here's the big news that really says a lot about what's going on here. And then we're going to get into the Pierce press conference. So we already talked about a little bit earlier. We already talked about the fact that Champ Kelly is in play for multiple GM jobs. Multiple people are hitting him up, and he's going to have an opportunity in multiple areas. But what's crazy is at a team meeting this week, Raiders coaches and staff were told that they would not be blocked from looking for other jobs, but that the organization wanted to be kept in the loop of any potential opportunities, according to league sources. So the current staff are told that they're not blocked for looking for other jobs. That's kind of crazy because typically you want to block your people as much as you can. That way, you know, people don't steal them for you. And if you want to keep Pierce, keep Kelly, you're obviously going to be blocking different people. So some took this to mean that Pierce and Champ Kelly are not locks to have their interim tags removed. According to sources, if they were locked, the Raiders would want Pierce and Kelly to retain many of their assistants and the same ones who now have permission to seek employment elsewhere. So, look, Davis is letting them look for work. Maybe he knows that he's not going to hire them, so he doesn't want to screw them over and wants to give them the opportunity to look for work elsewhere. That way, when it comes down to it and they find out maybe Pierce doesn't get the job, then they're not sort of screwed and looking for jobs way later in the last moment. So, look. When you have that coupled with the report that just came out this afternoon, tag team with this report that came out, I believe on the 6th, last night. So last night and this afternoon, you got reports. Raiders coaches and staff are allowed to look for jobs and interview elsewhere. They're not blocked as long as they keep the Raiders in the loop. And Kelly has gotten offers and opportunities from multiple places. Not Pierce, but GM Champ Kelly has. So Davis doesn't care about the money he owes Gruden, McDaniels, or Ziegler, or what it would take to lure a new GM or coach. He just wants to hit big and have this organization win. Pierce and Kelly have their supporters. They still need to get Davis as their biggest supporter. So all of that is going on right now. And all the people who are currently working for Champ Kelly, for Antonio Pierce, the people that they've promoted, Patrick Graham. That means Patrick Graham could interview elsewhere right now. He's not blocked. That might even be worse. Like, if you really like what the Raiders have done in defense, you got to give credit to Patrick Graham, and losing him would be horrible for this team. I mean, like, the defense is the best thing that they have. The defense is the best thing that they have, and now the defensive coordinator that the Raiders have, they're allowed to interview at other places. Honestly, they should be not allowing them to interview elsewhere to sort of keep Patrick Graham. But Graham's going to get his opportunities to look for other places and interview elsewhere. He's not going to be blocked. And Champ Kelly is already talking to people. He's in play for multiple NFL jobs. He's already talking to people right now. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Antonio Pierce is going to have to shuffle a lot of people if he's brought in. And I don't know, even though there's all this emotional stuff, I don't know if he really has won the job. Maybe he'll win the D coordinator if freaking, Graham is plucked. But all this is going on in the background. Mark Davis is going to interview Harbaugh. That's going to happen. Champ Kelly, the current GM, is interviewing elsewhere. And Graham and this staff is going to be allowed to interview elsewhere. And Pierce has put together a decent resume over the past 9 games, 5 of 4, technically a winning record. And you got this here, him pretty much right after the game. And I'm just like the body language. I was trying to figure out what he's smiling, but he's got the glasses on. Go through all of his press conferences. Go through all the press conferences. I mean, he never has the glasses on. You can take a look. It's always no glasses. So we got glasses here, no glasses. I mean, the guy never has glasses. The guy's constantly, looks like he's got contacts or he's just taking the glasses off. Who knows? Well, I wish I had contacts. I ran out. But he got, after that emotional win, after that lengthy meeting with Mark Davis that took a long time, he's got the glasses on. Kind of trying to smile.
Where's my guy?
AP.
Is he covering something up?
There you go.
AP, since taking over as interim, you've preached toughness, physicality, and violence. How proud are you how happy were you with that display today in your final showing as interim?
Yeah, that's what we talked about. I've been preaching since day one. Really bought into it the last week of the season.
And
when, people are making
he's trying to get into the brass tacks of everything and just talk about the game.
If they want to play football for 60 minutes.
And talking about the players, but so he talks during this.
The locker room, the fan base.
It talks about the fans being into him.
This is your childhood fan base. I'm just kind of wondering, how has it felt to have that
the emotions
support from the fan base?
Good. I got some time now to reflect on that. Now the season's over with. We'll handle our exit physicals and interviews here over the next couple of days, and obviously I got some other stuff to handle, and then have a chance to reflect over these last 9 to 10 weeks, which has been very humbling and honored for me.
Yeah, he'll have a chance to reflect. I mean, if he's supposed to be the head coach, I mean, maybe you don't have a chance to reflect. Maybe if he thought that he for sure was going to get the job, maybe he would, be more like hitting the ground running, right? You still got a lot of work to do. It's never stopping. And the fact that he is, having this time to reflect, it's like, oh, I'm going to reflect on the moment, remember the past. It almost sounds like it's coming to an end. It does.
AP, obviously, recently with the franchise and one strategy
been on full display. I think we rushed for over 100 yards.
So he's talking about the offense.
He's the OP.
I didn't get to where I'm at by not knowing football.
Oh yeah, this is where I think he's getting a little offended by some of the criticism. He's not known as an X's and O's guy. He's not an offensive or defensive guru. He's not calling plays on defense. He's not calling plays on offense. He's just sort of the momentum guy. That's the criticism against him, and he seems very offended by it.
I don't know how many times that's been over the last 9, but I know it's been quite a few. You see the shots. I mean, we'll get into all the X and O stuff. I get it. Player, coach, rah-rah guy, but I didn't get to where I'm at by not knowing football.
Ooh. So player, coach, rah-rah guy. He's talking about the criticism of him, how people call him players, coach, or rah-rah guy.
I didn't get to where I'm at by not knowing football. Coach, rah-rah. I mean, we'll get into all the X and O stuff. I get it. Player, coach, rah-rah guy, but...
Yeah, we'll get into the X's and O stuff. Player, coach, rah-rah guy. He seems offended by this. And then just like the demeanor in the press conference, I'm trying to decipher and tell, like, does he have the job? Is he meeting with Mark Davis for a long time because he's being told he's not getting the job? Is he finding out that he had the job and he's trying to hold in the excitement and not, kind of get emotional? Based on that rah-rah players coach thing, it sounds a little defensive. It sounds defensive to me. And if he knew that he was getting the job for sure, I don't think he would be defensive right now. I mean, that's just my, and I'm guessing. I am guessing, but it's tough for him because he's going against Harbaugh and maybe John Gruden. And we'll get into John Gruden too. But he's going against Harbaugh and John Gruden, and that's going to be tough for him to compete based on his resume, straight up.
You're only the third team since 2000. You pride
in final stats here in a second. It's a Raider record.
Man from the Wooded Mark.
Permanent head coach. Also having
role
in the
weeks talking, putting our thoughts together, trying to get the best roster and the best. He's well respected.
So what he says actually at the end tells everything.
In a good position.
Let me.
AP, you guys, last night
he's put himself in a good position. Growing to look like
it's very serious.
And no excuse, but it is difficult to do in the middle of the season, and to get guys to buy in. And
so we'll see. Hold on.
And he took over. I'm just curious about his match.
Tough individual. I mean, very calm, very man who buy in and believe what you're telling them, what you're saying, how to do things, how to never cheat on me. They don't talk enthusiasm.
So reflect on what this whole thing meant to you, but at the end there when you had that moment.
Out because I want to dap up all our players. But at the end of the day, when I was a player, I love to hear that noise from the crowd.
Growth from
talking about
60-40 home game. It was a Raider crowd.
So the crowd
that was loud.
This is where I think he slipped.
After it, and just show them appreciation. At the end of the day, when I was a player, I love to hear that noise.
So here's the big moment where he says, basically he says that he went and hung out with the fans because he might not be the coach next year. So he's basically saying that he wanted to savor the moment because he's probably not going to. Most likely, it seems like he's implying that he's not coming back.
To walk out and see the black hole and those guys just getting after it, I just wanted to love them up. Because listen, what if I'm not here next year? I didn't want to let that go by.
Yeah, there he goes. Listen, what if I'm not? I just wanted to love them up because, look, what if I'm not here next year? So look, it's not about what you want. What is happening?
Because listen, what if I'm not here? And those guys, I love to hear that noise from the crowd. And to walk out and see the black hole and those guys just getting after it, I just wanted to love them up. Because listen, what if I'm not here next year? I didn't want to let that go.
Ooh, I didn't want to let that down. Listen, what if I'm not here next year? I don't want to let that down. And so, you got the fact that Mark Davis is 100% interviewing Jim Harbaugh. That's happening whether you like it or not. And then you also have, I mean, personally, I don't know why you would dislike it. And then you have this comment here, kind of the defensiveness about him not being an X's and O's guy. And then now talking about living in the moment. He wanted to savor it because what if he's not back here next year? I mean, I think if you know that you have the job, you wouldn't make a comment like that. So he clearly, he probably doesn't know as much as any of us. Maybe Mark Davis didn't tip his hat one way or the other. Maybe Mark Davis made him. It's either he doesn't know he has the job or he knows he doesn't. He clearly isn't acting like he does have the job. That's what I'm saying. So it's either he doesn't know or he knows he ain't got it. Because he did seem very emotional in this press conference. He was wearing glasses. He did get defensive. And now he's sort of trying to savor the moment. And hopefully he could still be part of the Raiders organization as a defensive coordinator or something like that. But there does seem to be a lot of past tense talk, looking towards the future and, just enjoying the moment and not letting it slip by.
AP, just own growth.
But it is different when you're the head coach. Half.
Yeah. So I think that was the biggest thing that he said, which was that, let me pull this up yet. What if I'm not here next year? I didn't want that moment. You got players. But look, players are threatening to boycott. Will that have an effect? Will that work on Mark Davis? Mark Davis is a tough cookie. I don't know if that necessarily is going to work on him. So one thing, and this came out December 30th. This was right before the recent reports. And we made a video about this. And look, it's pretty much been well established at this point that when it comes to what the Raiders are going to do this offseason, when it comes to what they're going to do for their next head coach, I mean, for the most part, it has been narrowed down to Antonio Pierce, Jim Harbaugh, or John Gruden. And this is Ian Rappaport and Tom Pelissero, and this is on December 30th. These are the top NFL insiders in the world. And this is what they're saying. I mean, we brought this up. Davis is a believer that you need a big name in Las Vegas. The locker room likes Pierce, yes. But Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh would qualify as a big name, and Davis still loves Gruden. You have Ian Rappaport talking about Davis still loves Gruden. You also had Mike Florio of NBC also talking about how legally and technically Davis could hire Gruden if he wants to. And if you don't get Jim Harbaugh, in terms of the most experienced and in terms of the coach who has the best resume, Jim Harbaugh has less baggage. He has less baggage because he doesn't have the lawsuit like Gruden does. But in terms of on paper head coach, Gruden's the most qualified available head coaching candidate. I mean, he is. Whether you like him or not, you might think he would do bad or sucks or he's bad or something. In terms of a resume, what have you done in the past? Who are you? He is the most qualified, active head coaching candidate in the world right now for the National Football League. He is. So, and the fact that Ian Rappaport is saying that Davis still loves John Gruden, it must mean that there's a consideration here. It's a consideration here. Now we got Champ Kelly, his future being up in the air. Could he move on? That's a possibility. I mean, all this is huge. So we have all these reports that have come out over the past few days, in terms of the Harbaugh, in terms of the Gruden and the Antonio Pierce. One thing that's really important about Harbaugh and why I think it's even more likely he will definitely go to the Champ Kelly. If I misspoke on the Champ Kelly. Oh, yeah. So Audrey's given some facts that the Raiders would actually get a comp pick, a third-round pick for 2 years if they lost Champ Kelly, because they'd be losing their GM, and I believe there's some Rooney Rule stuff going on there that would affect that. And so Raiders would actually, you get an extra draft pick, but then you lose your GM who you apparently like. Now, look, maybe the Raiders could convince Champ Kelly to stay, so we know that he has multiple offers. That's what they're saying. Maybe he's just saying that to get paid a little more. Who knows? But I think he does have multiple offers, though. He interviewed a lot of places before being the Raiders' assistant. But Harbaugh has said, previously Harbaugh had said that he would want to have his preferred GM. That's what Harbaugh has previously said, and this is what Rap Sheet and Tom Pelissero are saying. But nowadays, they're saying that's not in Harbaugh's mind. He wouldn't mind mixing it up. Maybe if you want Champ Kelly, he wouldn't mind rolling with Champ Kelly. He used to be much more difficult and want his own guy, but now Harbaugh is much more flexible than previous years. That bodes well for the Chargers and the Raiders in terms of getting Harbaugh. So there's going to be, look, at the end of the day, you guys know who I want as the head coach. A lot of you who watch this channel a lot know who I want as the head coach. That's going to be tough. The lawsuit date, actually this Wednesday, we'll be dropping a video on John Gruden and his lawsuit. It's showtime against the NFL. The oral arguments will be there. But when it comes to what's likely going to happen, right now I think Jim Harbaugh has probably the best opportunity, because less baggage, and also, he's the most qualified. He's the most qualified. Now, in terms of Gruden, he has got back into the news. Carson Wentz was working with John Gruden. So John Gruden has his lawsuit date January 10th, this Wednesday. If he has some success in front of the Nevada Supreme Court, he will come back into the NFL. Even if he doesn't have success, he will still try to come back in the NFL. We all know this. Now, Gruden had been working out with Carson Wentz, trying to help Carson Wentz get back in the NFL. Carson Wentz hired him. And Gruden was asked by Mike Garofalo. So Gruden is speaking to NFL media more actively than lately, which is pretty crazy. But let me see if we can read this nicely. So John Gruden was on the phone with Mike Garofalo. So Carson Wentz started for the Rams today after working out with John Gruden. And he says that he'll be watching. That's what he does. Hopefully Wentz looks good. And, you know, he spent some time with him, getting him mentally right, working with him, trying to help him get back into the league. And Gruden made some more comments. And, like, we really haven't heard from this guy. And I find it very interesting that he's talking a lot more because it just seems like he's getting more warmed up and welcomed back into the NFL after being canceled like that. So here's what he says. The big thing was helping him fall in love with the game again. It was an emotional roller coaster after Philly, blah, blah, blah. And it's like with Joe Flacco, you're home watching and you think you're better than some of these guys who are playing. So he got him back into falling in love with the game. Gruden's agent had a relationship with Wentz's agent, but this is just crazy seeing Gruden talk to the media, talk to people, talk to the NFL Network. Seems like he's becoming more and more warm to coming back into the NFL. And he talked about how the Rams would be a good place for him. So Gruden talk. I think the bigger story in this is Gruden talking to Mike Garofalo, who works on the NFL Network. You guys probably see him all the time. So the fact that he's like communicating with these people, it just seems like he's warming up and getting back into the league. That's what it seems like to me. You guys could take it however you want to take it, but that's what's happening right now. How is everybody doing? We've been live for some time, a good amount of time. There's not much else we need to discuss here right now. We talked about the Pierce. We talked about, you know, the Raiders' next coach, Mark Davis, meeting with some peeps. Before I sign off, is there any news that I may have missed? I want to make sure we have everything up to date. You have Davante Adams making a comment. This could actually be pretty big. This could be pretty big. And by the way, yes, I showed the video the other day, and I know that made people upset. That, you know, Crosby saying positive things about keeping Antonio Pierce, but he said the same thing about Josh McDaniels. And you could try to act like that didn't happen. Just watch my recent video. I mean, the dude used to say the same shit about how, oh, we need to keep him. He's doing great. You know, he said the same thing about genius Josh McDaniels. I'm just going to show the clip real quick, just in case people forgot. I mean, I know people get busy with everything. And I've never flipped on anyone. I've never been pro Antonio Pierce. I've said that I hope he's good enough to get the job, but I've always said that Harbaugh and Gruden are more qualified than Antonio Pierce. And the best person for the Raiders is who I want, whoever could get the Raiders to a Super Bowl. That's who I want. And I don't know if it's a guy who's never really done it.
Yeah, I think Coach McDaniels done a hell of.
All right. So yeah, I mean, look.
Yeah, I think Coach McDaniels done a hell of a job, and guys love him, and he's the same guy every day, and that's, you know, I could say it a million times.
But you know what I'm saying? Like these guys praise everybody. There's Max Crosby. You know, McDaniels is the same guy.
Obviously, like you said, you can read all the headlines and the negativity and things like that.
You just can't believe.
Obviously,
here's Max Crosby.
You said you can read all the headlines and the negative. I think Coach McDaniels has done an awesome job. You know, obviously, like you said, you can read all the headlines and the negativity and things like that.
So you got to take everything with a grain of salt. That's all I'm saying. You got to take everything with a grain of salt. You know, one moment they're pro McDaniels, one moment, because you got to just say thumbs up to whoever's currently working for you. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. But Davante Adams wasn't sure if Mark Davis needed more. He says, today was a stamp. You heard how the fans responded. It's clear that Pierce has changed the culture. He's definitely deserving. And, you know, he's pretty much pumping up Pierce, saying that the fans are on board with Pierce. You heard them, you know, still rooting for him to get the job. We don't know how legit this is. Right? Like, he could just be pumping up whoever he's working for. They pumped up McDaniels back in the day. So you got to take it all with a grain of salt and be an adult about it. I mean, these guys, let's be adults. These guys are at work, right? And they're going to say nice things about who might be their employer. And they know they don't make the decision anyways. So you're pretty much going to just speak positively and that's it. But hey, hopefully this is more significant. Hopefully, whoa. Bombshell. Shout out to everybody who stayed just discovered something great and something serious to talk about here. Mark Davis caught up with Paul Gutierrez of ESPN after the game. I want to see what this guy said. I mean, this is huge. I mean, shit. I wish this would be in the beginning of the video. So Mark Davis noted that he has no time frame in naming a full-time coach, acknowledged that he's got to set up interviews and comply with the Rooney Rule. He said he's excited about what Pierce did. And the key thing he's saying here is I think the team played really well down the stretch, and I think going 4-2 in the division is really positive for us. Obviously, that's what we have to take care of first is the division. And we went into Kansas City in a tough game and beat them 24-14 on Christmas Day. We took care of Denver here at home at the end of the season. Let's see if he says any final, so he's speaking positively, but not tipping his hat one way or another. And when it comes to Pierce, says that he wanted Pierce to lead and delegate and not necessarily be an X's and O's coach. And he says, there's no question about it. You tell me if he freaking you did a good job leading. And so he's positive. Plunkett saying some positive thing. Woodson saying some positive things as well. Guys have really been pumped up about this. And you had a lot of the Hall of Fame talking about this, but when it comes to Davis, seems like Davis, this is a little bit of clickbait. Seems like Davis, I mean, not really clickbait. I mean, it's just Davis didn't say much. He just had a few comments that, he's excited about what he's done. But you had Woodson and all of that talking about this, and Woodson praising Antonio Pierce, saying because he's played, he's got that football mindset. But when it comes to Davis, it seems like in this article, I have to go through the process of interviews, setting up interviews, and then letting you know what we're doing. Any time frame? Nope. Probably before next season as a joke. But doesn't seem like Davis is saying much. You have just Woodson mainly talking about this. Really. So, hey, Mark Davis. Pierce, asked about this and not throwing his hand one way or another, but he spoke positively about the division and said that he's excited, but didn't necessarily say that Pierce has the job. And, he thinks he did a good job, it seems like, and that he's excited, but he didn't tip his hat one way or the other and says he has to do the exhaustive search. So perhaps it'll be a stretch to see if he comes in. Did I hear Jaden Daniels was at the game? Was Jaden Daniels really at the game? Huh. That's a little odd. It's Vegas. So that's not super crazy. It's a cheap flight. It's a cheap flight from anywhere. But, I think in terms of what's been going on, just had some good stuff there from Paul Gutierrez, some stuff from Crosby, a little bit of stuff from Mark Davis, Devontae Adams. We talked about some of the latest reports as well. Hopefully Pierce was just emotional because of the moment. And maybe, he was emotional and just trying to hide the fact that he has the job locked down. Look, life is easier if the Raiders do hire Pierce. Life is easier if he really is the guy. If Mark Davis really believes that he could take them to the promised land, that makes things easier because he's already in the building and he would be a lot cheaper than a lot of these head coaches. That is 100% true. Now, do I think that on paper, does it make sense that he's the guy? No, it doesn't. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. He's not more qualified than Harbaugh and a lot of these other head coaching. Compared to a lot of head coaching candidates, he's not as qualified in terms of his resume. But what he's done over the past 9 games seems like it's convinced Mark Davis enough that he is a legitimate candidate to be the head coach. He could be a sleeper head coach and be a cheaper head coach than somebody like a Jim Harbaugh or whoever else you hire. And the players are behind him. Like we said, the players were behind Josh McDaniels, so we don't know how valid that is. But if it's real, it's real. And we hope it is, because that does make things, if the players want him, if they really want him, that really is legit, if Davis believes in him, then it makes things easier and it makes it an easy decision. Let's see what another thing that he said.
Where we at? You know where we at? Right with you. Appreciate your support this entire season. Glad we went out with a bang with you. Raider Nation, stand up. We'll see you in 2024.
We'll see you in 2024. Now, Devontae also said we'll see you in 2024. It's technically already 2024, so does that mean next season? Is that a teaser? Who knows? Shout out to Brass Musin. Appreciate you. Is there a way we can get people to stop using no Vaseline in Raiders videos? NWA is closely associated with the Raiders, and that song is an NWA diss. Doesn't make sense to me to use that song. I mean, I don't know who are using these songs in different videos, but I say play whatever music you like. I don't think you gotta like NWA to be a Raiders fan. I mean, I personally like rap and hip hop, but I've not like NWA is classic, but it's not the greatest. I mean, Eazy-E's solo stuff's even a little better than the actual NWA tracks, and I do prefer Tupac and the Outlaws and stuff like that. But hey, people, play whatever music you want to play. It's not going to affect the wins and losses of the Raiders at all whatsoever. That's my opinion. But all that stuff, I think the fans did need to have some fun after the horrible Josh McDaniels situation. So I think some people who are into that, they got to feel like it's a party. The mother effer's gone, let's party. But look, the music people are playing, whatever. Pierce, should he get the job because he listens to NWA? Hell no. That should not even be in the conversation. But hey, should he get the job because Mark Davis thinks that he could be a sleeper candidate? The players are fighting for the guy and really are convinced that he could lead them to the promised land next year. When they talk about the freedom of him, I get a little worried about this because it's kind of like, are you sort of like, liking the fact that, he gives you a little too much freedom, and like discipline is important. So just because the boss lets you do whatever you want, like, should that be a reason to become the head coach of the Raiders? I don't know about that. I hope that's not what they mean, but sometimes I hear some of the points and it does sound like, well, yeah, he lets us be ourselves and lets us do whatever. I mean, we can't be too laxed, right? And if you're an inexperienced coach, you might be a little more laxed. You might be. So we're checking it out here. Raiders did not make the playoffs. They're going to be drafting at number 13. Appreciate you guys hanging out for this live stream. I'm going to peace out. And I will be making some more content this week. We'll be covering the Raiders, covering some of my favorite stories around the NFL. We're going to try to cover as much stuff as possible. Whenever we do make something, it's going to be the most important when it actually matters. I'm not interested in just uploading every day for the sake of uploading. I know some people have asked me to upload more, but I really want to make something when I think it's important and not waste anybody's time and stuff like that. So we'll be making some videos all this week, carrying out into the offseason. We'll be live during the playoffs. Even though the Raiders aren't in it, we're still going to be live hanging out during the playoffs. And also, after the playoffs, we're going to try to keep up an off-season weekly live on Wednesdays. We'll give you more information about that, but make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you like this video. If you've watched all the way at this point, if you've literally been watching for over an hour, that means you really appreciate this channel, and we would appreciate it if you subscribe to help support this channel and like this video as well. So, hey, I mean, if you're watching this long, even if you disagree with some of my takes, and disagree with some of my opinions, I mean, you're watching this long. I mean, that's hard to get people to watch that long. I mean, I don't watch, hard for me to watch things that long. But appreciate all of you. And hey, hopefully Mark Davis makes the right decision, whatever that is. But it seems like this guy is going to weigh all of his options and see what's going down. And based on some of Pierce's body language, from me, I don't know. But if I had to guess, it seems like he doesn't know, or he knows it's maybe not working out right now. Carr got knocked out of the playoffs. We got a Saints fan in the chat. We'll be making some videos about that. A lot of cool things are happening with that team as well. But we're going to be covering all kinds of teams in the NFL. I really, You know, when people make fun of me and they say, oh, when you make NFL content, it's just car videos or Gruden videos. Dude, I wish I was making more stuff about other teams. You just got to have some more time for it. And finally, I believe I do have more time for it. So we're going to break it all down. My name is Wi-Fi Willie. Peace out, everybody. And we hope you have a good one. Let's